Welcome back to the BestWorst31 podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Leland. My next guest is the founder of Project Compassion NFP, which she founded at the age of 25. And since then, they've gone on to assist well over 70,000 homeless, disadvantaged, and low-income men, women, and children. She's an award-winning philanthropist, inspirational speaker, and therapist. And so I'm excited to learn more about how that's all come together for this incredible venture. She's received national and local attention and awards in such publications as Glamour Magazine, Gazelle Magazine, O Magazine with Oprah, who's one of my favorite people in the world, and many others. And you can learn more about her at www.rachelrenata.com. Welcome, Rachel Renata.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. So, I'd love to know a little bit more about your current role and what do you do with your organization?
So I am currently the executive director of Project Compassion, the nonprofit organization I started 16 years ago. I handle day-to-day operations, oversee just typical nonprofit management structure, programming, development, and staffing. I also serve as the therapist, where I work with clients who have experienced nonviolent trauma, emotional trauma, as well as grief trauma, and grief counseling and family and youth support. I have a focus more on middle school to high schoolers.
Excellent. So if you can tell me, maybe I'll break this up a little bit. I'm kind of curious about how you entered into the therapeutic space and what made you want to go into that direction, and then also your path to creating Project Compassion.
Yeah, so Project Compassion came before the therapeutic space. Project Compassion birthed the therapeutic space. Excellent. So starting Project Compassion really was one of those moments where I was searching within for myself. I was looking for just some purpose, felt a calling to help others with an emphasis on homeless individuals. A lot of that was centered around my own personal life experience of losing my mother. And as the youngest at 19, you don't realize that home is where your parents are, right? And so losing my mother and not having a relationship with my father could have placed me in a state of homelessness. And if to be honest, I guess if you don't have a place of your own, you are. So I lived with an aunt for about 6 months until I got my own permanent housing. And so with that, it put a sense of compassion within me and grace and becoming a single mother and just recognizing that, man, I missed a lot of potholes in life. Like I should have really had a different outcome. And so I felt called to help. And so when dealing with the homeless and dealing with homeless women, dealing with their children, and when I say dealing, meaning day-to-day interactions, helping with basic need items, doing that, I learned more about their stories and understood that homelessness is trauma. And I wanted to know that if I'm serving any other human being, I'm doing so with not only heart and compassion, with education, skill-based. And so that's what led me to say, you know what, I'm going to become a therapist. And so I wanted to work with the families and then offer that service through Project Compassion as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. What a young age, 19, to really be on your own. At age 19, I was I still had my mother around. I was off to college, living in a dorm, had shelter, had food. My mom didn't have a lot of money. She had 5 kids as a single mom. So we did the best that we could. But that must have been just you had to grow up really, really fast.
Yeah, I tell everybody I became an adult the day my mom died because I, at that moment, had to figure out everything from school to what was next for me. When you have parents, it's easy to go for at least some advice and guidance. But when you no longer have that, it literally is trial and error. And so I often say from 19 up, life taught me life. Life was kind of my guide because I didn't know. It was just so much I just still didn't know, but I was able to just learn from it, use it for the good of doing more with myself. Being able now to pour differently into my children. But life looks different at 19 when there is no bottom, it's a whole different worldview. And so it took me several years to recognize that was not normal. The life I lived from 19 was not normal. That there was some trauma there, just trying to figure things out. And so my mother's death, though she was aware of her condition, she did not let us know. So it was unexpected. So I had to go through that process. And so I recognized that wasn't normal to be 19, but also recognize there's kids that are younger. The benefit is the younger you are, the more there's a system to pick you up, right? Foster care, family placement. But at 19, we live in a society, especially as African Americans, where 18, you're grown. Mm-hmm. So the stigma was already there that I was supposed to be grown at 19. But truth of the matter is I was very much a child, emotionally and mentally. But I was forced into adult world.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of avoiding quite a few potholes and that helping to form compassion and grace. But one thing I want to learn more about Project Compassion in a minute, but I really want to talk about this idea about that was not normal, because honestly, I've had some conversations with friends who I grew up with where we saw a lot of violence, and whether it was stabbings or shootings, and there's a certain amount of trauma that comes, and that's outside of the house. Inside the house, we were growing up with a different type of trauma growing up. And looking back, I've had just these moments in our 30s and in our 40s of saying like, hey guys, that wasn't normal. Now that we know other people who didn't grow up the way we did, we realize that that's not everybody's experience, and that's all we knew. And I'm kind of curious how that influences and impacts the work that you do right now.
Yeah. And so for me, having a nonprofit and having the experience is a matter of helping clients, helping women come in and say, it's not normal to receive service for support. Mm. So it's about breaking that stigma. Oh, I have children. I'm considered poverty or low income, so I'm supposed to get the following benefits and services. Where when they come to me, it's like, this isn't normal, right? So what is going on that's making you rely on a system? Where's the disconnect? What are you missing? What are you needing? So it's about changing the lens of nonprofit service is really supposed to be support. Somehow they have created this dependency on it. So it's about coming in with the true exit plan. You're here, but it's to help you build, stabilize. And so that's where I say I avoided the potholes, because I used support to launch. Yes. I didn't use it to enable me in my current condition. So no, I didn't have a mom, but I had aunts. And no, I was a single mom, but I didn't want to be on welfare. So those were the things that, okay, go get a job. You have someone to watch your son. Go back to school. You have someone to, you see what I'm saying? So using those things not to enable me to keep making the same mistakes. And so that's where I do that within my clientele, is to say, this immediately saying this isn't normal. And how do we break the cycle for you?
I can appreciate that approach. It is really hard when, for somebody who's grown up in chaos or trauma, or violence or whatever their background may be, that does become normalized for them, and for you to be able to give them a broader view of what life could really be like. And I love how you frame that, really using the support to launch. Support is not a place where you stay and become dependent on it. Right. I mean, there's a certain healthy level of interdependence that all human beings need to have. Right. Healthy interdependence, but this idea of, searching for support as a means to launch you to, healthy independence and the ability to thrive and to actually maybe having even some self-efficacy or, some confidence to be able to make it and to be able to turn around and help other people along the way, which is incredible.
Yeah. And so it's easy though. I think being dependent on someone to help you is easier than carrying the load of just saying, hey, I got to get this done for myself. I got to get this, I got to make this happen. And so it's easier, but truth of the matter is adults don't want other adults telling them what to do.
Yeah.
So for as much as, it's like I'm super independent when it comes to, so one of the things I pride myself on is being able to provide or do things that allow me to not have to depend, because I don't want to answer to other people. Right. But when you're on a system, you got to answer who's in that household and what's going on. And people don't want that.
Yep. Yeah. So tapping into that definitely is a good motivation to kind of get out of there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. People definitely go into this space of saying, well, why are you asking all these questions? Because you need help, And so if you don't want the help, then you got to get independent. You got to become independent and self-sufficient and find a way to sustain your lifestyle, as well as one thing I teach the high school students is you can break your own cycle of poverty by continuing your education. The more you know, the more you can achieve. The more you're able to achieve and accomplish is because you're allowing yourself to get yourself in a room. College doesn't mean you're smart. College means you completed the courses according to the course assignment to get the grade so they can give you the degree.
Yep.
It's up to you to utilize what that degree gives you to get in a space and a place to build a foundation for yourself.
That's right.
And that's just really, it's about twisting that mind. Like, you know, and maybe college is not for you. Maybe there's a trade, or maybe there's a vocational training. Maybe there's something you can do, but learn it and get it so that you can get into the space to break that cycle of being dependent upon a system.
Yeah. That's a very powerful message for sure. I appreciate that. So can we talk a little bit more about Project Compassion and all the work that you do there?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm 16 years in. I tell everybody I grew up with this agency. I often tease like, when do you retire? You know, but, you know, starting as outreach for about 2 years, going out, distributing hygiene bags, realizing that, okay, I'm putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And so what more can I do? Realized that shelters needed that support as well, where they needed various programs. I never forget, I walked in. So for as much as I feel, or I'm often told, oh, you've empowered and impacted many lives, the lives have impacted this agency as well. So we currently sit in Belleville. Our campus here, we have 3 facilities, have definitely expanded out from that. But it was birthed out of me going to a shelter one morning. I never forget getting up, getting dressed, taking my baby to my second son at the time, taking him to daycare, getting my oldest on the bus. At the time I was married. So I did all those things, got dressed, go down to the shelter with all the things I had packed in my car for this mom that checked in. And she walked out walking on the back of her shoes, dragging her feet, very ungrateful, like, finally you're here. And I remember getting in my car going, nope. Well, number one, I'm not baby daddy. Number 2, you got to be responsible for your life. And I said, I got to change it. And so I began to look for a space to say, if they want it, they got to come get it. Because there's something about getting up, getting dressed, knowing you're going to get things to help your life, right? And so that's what birthed the Compassionate Resource Center. And so 13 years ago, opening this facility was about saying, we will give you all of the free resources. We will give you the support. We will give you everything you need, but you got to get up and get it. And so it was instrumental to be on a bus line. And so by doing so, now we have the resource center, we have a free diaper bank, we have a therapy facility, we have a free cafe. And then our final phase of kind of stretching, renovating services is a free laundry facility. We find that a lot of moms have to do, so we tend to service the homeless individuals that do, we like to call couch surfing, where mom may sleep at your house for a month or 2 weeks somewhere else, and then she has to move. Oftentimes they lose their items, or they don't have the proper conditions to wash clothes and things like that. So we want to offer them a free laundry facility where they can come in, do a load of laundry. 98% of kids miss school because of dirty uniforms, right? Or dirty clothes. So if you can come in, wash some uniforms, dry them, even if you're sleeping in your car, that kid can show up fresh and clean for the next day. And so we offer that here. So definitely just taking as much of what we can to help meet those basic needs, because when you really look over life, for me, I thrive at my best when my basic needs are met. So if we can get the basic needs met, now we can start working on those deeper rooted issues of how can we break your cycle of poverty? What do you need to feel sustained? What are you lacking? What are your goals? Without those met, then the focus is not there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Those basic needs are so critical. And, I think people want to, on the outside, sometimes who are frustrated with some issues they see around poverty and homelessness, are just like, why can't people just get it together? And it's like, look, if you don't have shelter, if you don't have food, if you don't have, safety, you can't get to that next step. You can't think about how do I deal with the issues that I'm dealing with? How do I secure employment? You can't. And so I can appreciate that approach.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that we've kind of prided ourselves on here at Project Compassion, just saying, what are the basic needs can we meet? And then how can we move forward from there?
Very good. So thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to know a little bit more about you and kind of your background. If you can tell me about kind of where were you born, where were you raised, and anything else you feel that your family background. I understand that your mom passed away when you were younger. If you could share whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so I grew up in a single parent home. My mother raised myself. I'm the youngest of three. We grew up in a very God-fearing home, Christian home. I often joke and say you couldn't call on Sunday. We couldn't fake sick because my mom was like, well, you definitely need to go to church for a healing. And it's like, oh, so, you're like, that doesn't work. You got to come up with something else. So, but my mother was, and I don't say this because she has transitioned, but my mother was my mom passed away when she was 47. Okay. I'm 40. Actually, I'm 41. So I say that to say she was extremely young. I was 19. So when I sit down and look back, I had a young mother. And but the amount of discipline, the structure we had in our home, the love, the joy that we had in our home, it's just like, how did she pull that off? I watched my mom work very hard in the community, the church, as a realtor, having her own business, just doing things that really gave us a quality of life. I didn't have uncles, in air quotes, I didn't wake up to people in my kitchen going, well, who is this guy? Yeah, she held herself with some really high respect and regard. And so I believe that was the foundation of everything that we had. And I believe that's what I tapped into. What would mother want? And so she raised us in Texas. And then I moved here to Illinois when I was about 12 or 13. I often joke and tell people, I'm not from here, not from here. Graduated Belleville East High School. And so I do work back in my high school. And so that has been great to go back and just see teachers and just talk about the experience from a hands-on approach of how things can be different. I am a mom. I have three. My oldest is a junior now. He's going into his junior year of college with a focus on pre-law. And so that's exciting to see, just to see him manifest. I often talk about, just our journey. He was that child that at least woke up inside of me something to say, you got to do something more for yourself. Because after my mom died, I went through a journey of grief and just disbelief that I really didn't have any type of hope. I didn't have anything to hang my hat on. And so having a son say, well, the least I can do is get a job with benefits, right? Mm-hmm. The least I can do is get a home or find a place for him to live that's safe. So at minimum, everything I did was for him. But by doing that now, as I continue to grow, I wanted more and I wanted more for him. And so ultimately ended up married for 12 years and ended up divorced. And out of that, we have a beautiful son that again, just who I am as a mother to both of them is different. It's taught me different things. And just through my journey of Project Compassion, though, I was able to kind of get in a situation to where I was helping one of the homeless moms, and ultimately she left her child in my care. And so her daughter, I ended up adopting her daughter to avoid her getting into a system and becoming lost into that system. So one day I took work home. Life. Yes, life. So just these 16 years have been something that has not only given me a worldview that life is so different for everyone and you can't just assume, but it has also shown me that there's a greater faith within if we believe to step out on it. And so it has built my faith, it's built my character for who I am. And so it's also given my children a sense of the world as well, because each one of them has grown up in it. They've all been a part of it, so that's important. I hold a bachelor's in business and I have a master's, of course, in counseling. And of course, enough certifications that I think if we combine them, I'll probably have a PhD, but no, they're not doing that yet, right? I do Project Compassion full time. I'm always instructing and teaching and guiding, facilitating in any space that I can. So I think I'm probably one of the fortunate people in this world to say that I get up every day to do my purpose in life. I've done other things, but this here is the natural fit. I do it, I see it happening, and that's what's important. I get up every day with a purpose.
That's the dream, to be able to get up every day and feel like you have purpose in what you're doing, to live your purpose every day. Your mom sounds like what an amazing role model in her 47 years, all the things that she taught you, all the hard work, her integrity. and her ability to raise you, in the way that she felt was the right way. And you took many lessons from that. And then, of course, you get to have your two boys, and then this unforeseen bonus that you have a daughter now too, which you get to raise. So you get the best. I've never had a chance to have a daughter. One of my life regrets. And so that's, you're very fortunate and blessed to be able to have both, the initial role model, and then the ability to act it out and live it out yourself.
Yeah.
I can also connect, and I'm sure a lot of people can connect with the purpose that children give us. Again, my son, when I was a young dad, and I think I was in grad school, but I was starting to lose my way and go a little crazy. And I remember he anchored me, and now he's an adult, similar age to your son in college and your oldest. And it's almost like they leave us just in time for us to be able to really start moving and be able to be motivated to do it without having to see him every single day. But they play such a critical role. Our young people play such a critical role in our lives.
Absolutely. When my son was younger in school, and he would, do boy stuff. He was a great kid. I mean, he really was. I was like, dude, you're like a good kid. Like, college is going to blow my head off because you're too good of a kid. But I never forget, he would get these into boy trouble. I mean, throwing a shoe across the room because he wanted to get somebody's attention, right? Usually a little girl. And I remember saying to him, if I'm not going to embarrass you as a mom, because at this point I had been on the Tyra Banks show, and he would take the video in, and I would say, how do you feel taking that in? He's like, I said, how would you feel if I showed up at your school drunk? And I kind of went through all of these embarrassing scenarios. And he was like, I would be embarrassed. I'd be angry. I said, how do you think I feel when I get calls from the school? And I remember seeing this little light bulb pop on, and I said, if I am not going to embarrass you as your mother, you shouldn't embarrass me as my son. And so what it did was it created that focal point of, I'm doing things not because I'm an adult, and as it gotten older, of course, I started landing on thicker. Like, if you're going to bring home seeds, I could have just smoked crack, and it's like, he's like, oh, what? I was like, why am I being great if you're not going to be great? And so, it's just those things that you try to see if that works, right? He's like, but nah. That's a lot. I really tried with that one, and that didn't land well. But my point to him is, I do a lot to sacrifice so that you and your siblings can have something greater than what I had, because I had to do the long way around. My son's getting ready to turn 20. I'm like, dude, you have more than me at 20. You have and it's like driving that piece home. But again, I've normalized so much of his life that for him, this is the norm. And I had to say, statistically, neither you or myself are supposed to be in this state of being right now. So that's what I want him to grasp onto, that this cannot be wasted, because it's a gift. It's an opportunity that something happened 20 some years ago that allowed my mom to pull out of this and make this happen for us. So I got to take on to that. And that's the key piece. And of course, with all my life experiences, so I didn't have a relationship with my father until I was like 12 or 13. And then when my mom passed away, he was very adamant on, well, you can't come live here. And I'm like, well, I wasn't asking that, but thank you for that reinforcement. But I never forget one thing, that whatever happened between her and him years ago, it caused us to not have a relationship. And when I became a mother, that was one thing I was adamant on. I don't want to close my eyes and my child has to make a call to someone they barely know and get rejected. So my personal experiences have always made sure my children are connected to their father, always making sure that relationship is there, no matter what personal issues are there. If anything should happen to me, you shouldn't feel like you're living with a stranger. So those are those key things that play a part. And then I taught my son super early just how to communicate and handle business and banking account, because the trauma for me was understanding that I had been taught those things, but then handed those things all of a sudden. So my mom, being a business owner, she was a part of the Illinois to Work movement. And so she would get federal funds to help train Medicaid workers to be able to do work. And so that allowed me to sit. Sometimes I'm passing out snacks, but I'm learning. I'm listening to how she's training them to talk on the phone and talk. And so I'm learning all of these skills that I had to use. And so for me, it was just like, I'm going to teach this stuff early to my son. So I've taught them a lot of things early. I can give my 12-year-old my debit card and say, run in the store and buy your Gatorade. And he goes in, puts the pen in, comes out, here's your receipt, Mom. And it seems like a small task, but I'm teaching him, go into the store, look for this particular item, but look at this price. And I let them do those things so that if in the event something should happen to me, they're prepared.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And, it's funny. I just was laughing when you were sharing about, your attempts to motivate him in some sticking points of his life as far as embarrassing you and, in high school about like you're working hard. My son and I unfortunately had some similar conversations at different times. You do your best, right? You try to figure out what works and what doesn't. But what really stands out to me is this idea of, you went the long way around, but it allowed for him to have a clear path.
Yeah.
And that's just, I guess that encompasses parenting in itself right there. If for those of us who had to go the long way around, find whatever level of success or health or steadiness in our lives, we were willing to go the long path in order for our most loved people in our lives to have a more direct path. And then, also the last thing I'll say about this is the way you're raising your kids reminds me of what a parent told me many years ago when I was having dinner with this work event on campus, and her second daughter was going to college, and my son was like 9 at the time, and I said, your second kid is going to college, you're going to be an empty nester, like how do you handle it? Because for me, my son was 9 and I couldn't imagine living life without him being with me often. And she said her mom raised her to be independent, and so she did the same thing with her daughters in order for them to be able to make it out on their own.
Yep.
And so I remember from that point on, I think within a couple of years, I had him doing laundry and all kinds of stuff in the same way of just understanding that this will end. This part of our life of parenting will end. And so how do we transition them? Well, so we're going to take a little bit of a break here before we go into the big question.
Okay.
All right. So as you know, this podcast is called The Best Worst Thing. And this is a time for our guests to share a personal or professional setback where they experienced some sort of a challenge, loss, or difficult experience. And so we want to know what the experience was, how did you get through it, and then what lessons would you want people to take away who are listening to this episode. So Rachel, what is your best worst thing?
The best worst thing for me is when I got divorced. It was a decision that I made, a very long, well thought out decision. I went in a little naive, thinking it could go one way. It went totally left. It was the darkest time of my the darkest time of my adult life. And the reason being is, I just expected some things to go differently. I thought I had reached a place where, managing and communicating was a true skill set. What I saw was I found myself in a position of truly, truly tapping in within myself. I kept feeling like if I'm going to survive this divorce, I need to get more. But what I realized was the more was in me. So it was a hard time because the support that I thought would be there was not there. The communication that I thought was going to be there. And then it was a battle. It was a very weird battle. And so it became a hard battle. And it's like every day a fight. And so two, it caused me to tap into my faith. I mean, press into my faith. The other thing is it made me realize that whether you are married, divorced, baby mama, you should always be able to provide for your child at a level to where whether extra support come in or not. So what I saw in that season of life was instead of breaking, I built. Instead of looking at this as a breaking moment, this is going to destroy me. I start literally every time I would pray, it was like, I was like, but it's already in you. So now it's like, what did I really get that master's in therapy for? And how can I utilize it beyond what I'm doing? You see what I'm saying? So there were so many other opportunities that I really had to finally wipe the tears out of my eyes and recognize that I'm fighting a battle that was never meant for me to fight because I'm relying on something that was never meant for me to rely on. So once I got that in my mind and started, it was like no stopping. You're seeing avenues of building and operating and functioning and putting yourself out there in ways to where now opportunities are coming. And it's like, oh boy, but it took that. I needed that. I needed that valley. I tell people that was a valley. That was truly a valley that I needed to walk in, that I needed to be thirsty in, that I needed to be hungry in. And I needed to do it with some of the accolades on my back. I needed to do it with some of the expectations hanging over my head because it birthed something differently out of me. And instead of leaving out resentful, I actually left out grateful. I left out with forgiveness. I left out being able to face my ex-husband with a sense of respect for the fact that I wasn't clear enough to understand roles. Now we all know that there's expectations through divorce and when you have children, but even if, a person fails to do what they're supposed to do. So, and I don't know if this is like a Christian podcast, but it just took me back to, when you go back to the God, Hebrew boys in fiery furnace, and they were saying, even if God doesn't show up in this furnace, I know, even if he doesn't deliver us, I know he's going to still make a way. He's still going to do what he's going to do. And that's what I walked out with. Even if my ex doesn't show up and do what he's supposed to do, God is still going to provide. And he's going to hold me accountable to everything that's within me. All the tools, the resources, the knowledge, he's going to hold me accountable. Use what I gave you. And as I started using what he gave me, he started providing and increasing in that area. It was literally me tapping within. And so that's when I'm like, man, that was a horrible time. But I'll tell you this, I regret the grumbling and complaining.
Oh, wow.
I regret looking back at that time. By the time I caught it, I'm like, man, I could have been out of the valley a long time ago. There was an exit back there. But I was focusing on getting out. I wasn't looking at the way. I was just focusing on getting out. And so, I am grateful for that moment. And I don't want to go back. Don't send me back. I got it. I don't need to go back. Yeah, let's revisit. No, I'm good. But it's definitely that was probably the best worst moment because of how it all worked out and what I learned, and who I became at the end of it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I used to always say when I got divorced, I don't wish it upon anybody. And then I got married and got divorced again. Second one was not as bad as the first one, but still, it can be very difficult. But what I failed to do is in the first one, I think I was more able to do in the second one, which is what you did, was, focus on not the resentment, but the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Focus on, what is it about me where I need to reset and figure out what I have inside of me in order to build back up and not look for external ways to build back up. Work with what I have versus looking for other ways, other shortcuts. I mean, and trust me, I tried everything, borrowing money, doing this, doing that. And everything, you said this multiple times, I have it in me. It was inside of me the whole time. And that experience made you really, when you were ready to dig deep, and you had everything you needed. And honestly, it sounds to me like from our conversation, that's really been a big influence on some of the work that you're doing as well, which is a very, very powerful thing that everybody can ideally walk around knowing that that's in them. So I can really appreciate that. And then the final thing I'll say is, you mentioned you decided not to break, but you decided to build. And that's a choice that you made. And so that comes from a deep faith and something pretty powerful inside. Knowing that you had everything you needed to possess inside of you. And so it's a powerful message. It's a very powerful message.
Yeah. And it's really the true takeaway. We can say all day long, I'm not meant to break. But then if we don't break, what are we supposed to do with that? And for me, it was about building. And I'll say this, my pastor preached about forgiveness. And that was really my light. And one thing he said throughout the whole sermon, because I was like this, the whole sermon, mouth turned up. No, ain't. Not happening, sir. But one of the things he said was, so keep in mind, in my mind, I'm looking at all the things that I know I'm trying to get accomplished now, right?
Right.
This is where I saw the doorway light. So you know how you see like, oh, there's a light right there. He said to me, well, he didn't say to me, he said to the congregation, he said, what if everything you're wanting God to do in your life is on the other side of forgiveness. He said, if you were to forgive at this moment and give forgiveness over and give that situation, that person, and know that that is what God, that's the door. Like that door will swing open. Who would you forgive? I couldn't get out of there fast enough to start calling, hello, hey, how you doing? They were like, whoa. And it wasn't a force, but it was that moment where, and so when people say unforgiveness is like drinking poison, I'm like, that doesn't resonate with my spirit. Like, I'm never going to drink poison. So, but to hear that there's a door with everything, think about everything you want in life.
Yeah.
And the fact that I simply have to let go and say, you know what, whether I hear I'm sorry or not, I'm done. When I tell you the battle ended for me and I just start following that light all the way through. And I'm telling you, once I got on the other side, it was like, that was the part that was stopping me. Like I knew that it was like, man, I'm off in direction. What's going on? The minute I gave that forgiveness, the minute I could pick up that phone and call my ex-husband and say, I forgive you. Like I forgive. And guess what? Forgive me too. Forgive me too, because for every action, there's a reaction. For every nasty word, there's a nastier word.
Yep.
Once I was able to do that and meant it, and like when I tell you I meant that thing, like the blessing was gonna fall through my house. Everything changed. Everything. It was like the last key component to what I was looking for, and I haven't gone back on it. I mean, you just find really nice ways to tell people off to where you don't have to apologize later, and you keep it moving. But here's the thing: that's the burden of divorce, right? Then there's days you call and you laugh and you joke about things and you say, "Oh, that child gets that from your side of the family," and then you hang up and you keep moving on, right? And then there's other times you're like, "Dude, what is it?" Yeah. So you learn that, and so you relearn your ex-partner, and then you say, "How can I deal with this person?" Knowing that the commonality is that we have to raise a child together until we no longer have to raise this child together. But even have an adult child, there's always going to be those moments where you might have to check in or say, hey, talk to your son and and things like that. But you do it with a sense of maturity and kindness to where you just, again, that forgiveness was a lot to get that apology to come up at the throat. I don't want to do that every day, all day. So I tend to tread lightly in that water.
Well, I think that's a very powerful message. What could be on the other side of that door if you were willing to forgive?
That's right.
If all things were there, I think it's a good challenge to a lot of us. Yeah. Well, Rachel, I want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you and how to follow you or follow your organization. What's the best ways for them to get in contact with you or follow your organization?
So I am on Facebook as Rachel Renata, and that's RACHEL, and then it's RENATA. I'm at rachelrenata.com. You can find all my handlers there. And on Instagram, I am Rachel Renata. So I am Rachel Renata. So just start there. And then, of course, Project Compassion NFP. And so it's our agency name.org. You can always find more about what we do there, our programs, our services. You can learn more there.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking time with me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the BestWorst31 podcast. I'm your host, Josh William. Music is produced by Josh One. You can follow him at BoomNote on Instagram and Twitter, and Josh One on Spotify. Our episodes are edited by Cool Jets Audio and Visual. You can follow them at CoolJetsAV on Instagram. Our marketing is designed by Francesca Daniels. You can find her at FrankandKitty24 on Instagram. And our overall design is by Inspired Design with Ryan Daniels. You can find them at getinspired.design on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the BestWorst31.
Trailblazer, main face your optics. I rock this, cops this, blaze your boombox. The cool Cali kid from the boondocks. Bounce to your hood like Chaka with a crime on. Independent thing to play a beat, I get my rhyme on. So when I strut on a path to perfection, city to your borough, to your town, to your streets. Keep your party live, Josh One got beats out of nature. Grazer, Oakland, strays to Asia. It's like Fraser, force of Fantasia.